Hi everyone, Radical Dreamer here, and welcome to the Postal Code Unknown podcast for Wednesday, July 12th of 2017. Hope you're having a wonderful day so far. I've got a cool snow globe to share with you guys today. If you can see what it says there, it says Casa Loma. So this is actually a castle in Toronto, Canada, that I visited when I was up there. Originally I was planning on so when I was researching my original trip, the point was to get from one side of the world to the other and circumnavigate the globe. So I'd been looking into long distance train travel, and ideally I wanted to take the Trans-Siberian Railway from Europe to get to Southeast Asia before going back home. So that was sort of going to be my connection route. But I didn't know how I was going to feel about multiple day train travel and sort of what that would be like. Would I like it? Would I hate it? Would I otherwise? So at the time, Via Rail, Canada's rail service, was running like a 50% off promotion for train trips. So there's a 4-day train trip that runs from Toronto to Vancouver. And I was like, great, I'll be able to see whether or not this is something that I'm going to love or hate. And when I got to Toronto, my train was actually canceled. So that sort of threw that whole idea out the window. But what I was able to do instead was take a different train. And I'll get to that in a moment because it's really worth discussing. But I sort of bring up this particular snow globe just because it may not be the train sort of which was the focus of the trip, but it's a place I wouldn't have been able to visit if my train hadn't been canceled. Sort of like the little snow floating around sort of brings back memories for me of the time that I spent in Canada because it had been winter at that point in time. So I went out to visit some friends in Toronto and see the Niagara Falls from the Canada side, which I'd never gotten a chance to see, because from the other side, the last time that I went, it would just after they had instituted the regulation where you needed a passport to cross over into Canada, or at least a passport to cross back into the United States, and at the time I didn't have one, so I got to see the United States side and got to stand on the Rainbow Bridge crossing between the two, but I wasn't able to go over and see what it was like on the other side. So this was really nice to sort of go back and sort of finally sort of get back to a point where I was like, hey, I'm hoping someday I get to make it back here, and I was able to. So Toronto, I really enjoyed as a city. I'm a big fan of poutine. I think it's delicious, and I wish more places had it. It's my preferred way to eat sort of French fries or potatoes, followed closely by frites or chips that you'll get in places like Belgium. Yeah, so Toronto was really really spectacular. I really enjoyed the going down to see the Niagara Falls, which was just shortly south. The hostel I was staying at actually had a comedy club in it, which was really fantastic. So there's one in sort of downtown Toronto, I believe near Queen Street, but I can't remember exactly, that has an attached comedy club, and it was just fantastic to be able to sort of have that kind of social atmosphere in a place like that. That really just was awesome. So I have good memories of Toronto in general. And Casa Loma, sort of like I've mentioned it a couple of times just because it evoked, it's a cool castle that's near the city that you can go around in and explore, and there's a secret passage inside, and it's just weird to sort of see this thing exist in a place that you wouldn't expect it to. So Toronto I really enjoyed. And to sort of circle back around, I mentioned earlier that I didn't end up taking the train trip because it was canceled. There was a freight accident, so they weren't letting trains go in between the country. I did end up taking a 2-day train trip instead, and I flew over to Vancouver and then took a Greyhound up to Jasper, which is just a cool, really cool town that I wish I had more time in. And I only really had the morning there because the Greyhound got me there fairly early. And I didn't really sleep. The person behind me was kicking my seat, and I hate that. I'm sure nobody else really enjoys that. But got to Jasper, and it's just snow covered and gorgeous, and there's tons of skiing and other things out there. It's just such a beautiful town that I'd love to go back to someday. And when I had talked to a agent for, or getting a refund on that ticket, I asked, okay, well, the whole point of this trip was to sort of see if I'll like multiple day travel, and which route do you think is your favorite? Again, I'm a big fan of asking questions. A lot of people that work in these professions are very knowledgeable about what they do, and she suggested this particular route that went from Jasper to Prince Rupert. So it was 2 days. It wasn't an overnight train. The train actually sort of stops and then picks up and continues the next day. But it was just, I sometimes don't have the words to describe some of the things that I've seen on these trips. And this train trip was just absolutely extraordinary. And the thing is also sort of like at the time of year, not very well traveled as far as I could tell. The first day, there was a tour group that went maybe 2 hours along the trip with me, and then got off at a stop and had a bus take them back to Jasper. And at that point, I had the entire train to myself, almost the entire day, which was weird and surreal. And as somebody that sort of loved trains growing up, just sort of really a wild kind of thing where I was able to sort of like, look outside and just really experience this winter wonderland sort of magical kind of thing. Again, I was also hoping to see the Northern Lights, but with cloud cover at that point in time, just didn't manage to happen. So at some point in the future, that's definitely on my bucket list as well. But it was such a gorgeous train trip, and if you're looking for just like a couple of days, it's one that I strongly recommend through some beautiful parts of the Canadian Rockies. With some just, I think it would be gorgeous at different times of the year, but it was special during the winter. So, I hope this has sort of given you some things to think about in trips. If you're thinking about doing train trips just to enjoy the train trips, this one was particularly good, and not terribly long. As I learned later, I don't really like long-term train travel, at least going by myself. Because it's hard to sort of, especially if you're in a country that doesn't speak the language, being alone for very long periods of time without being able to communicate can be difficult. So that's something to struggle with. So like, again, it is also something that I would strongly recommend as a trip to do with people. But, hey, if you're a solitary person and you enjoy having solitude, which I do at times, it's definitely a great place to do that. So that's the Via Rail trip from Jasper to Prince Rupert, if you're looking for that. I can't really vouch for the Toronto to Vancouver, but Vancouver's an amazing city that I think is worth visiting as well. So that is stories from my Canada adventure, and I hope you enjoy. Take care, and I'll talk to you again tomorrow. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you'd like to see more of what I've been doing outside of these videos, you can see more at theradicaldreamer.com, where I've got articles and photographs with travel advice and stories that aren't just in a video format. You can follow me on Twitter at OneRadicalDreamer or on Instagram at aradicaldreamer if that's something that you're more interested in. If you're interested in supporting me, I do have a Patreon page up as well, which you can find at patreon.com/theradicaldreamer. And that's a way for as little as $1 a month, you can help support me get better equipment and do more videos of this type and make a whole bunch more cool stuff to share with you in the future. And last but not least, if you like what you've been seeing on YouTube, please like, subscribe, and send a couple comments. I'd be happy to answer more questions in future episodes of the podcast. Hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you. Take care.